So Dershowitz is doing great. He wants everyone to know he's fine and not at all concerned about where this case might be leading.
He's actually laughing.
Yeah. The other guy who's also doing great and wants everyone to know that like he's not bothered at all is Steven Pinker. And I swear to God, like if nothing else comes out of this case but ruining his reputation,
That would be awesome.
I'll take it. Because he has played Dr. Pangloss for like the worst people alive, like as long as he's been a public intellectual.
Yeah.
Like he's one of the biggest frauds that's been like coasting on this reputation of being a genius who basically only flatters the incredibly wealthy and powerful.
Yeah. No, he's a court intellectual. I saw him at OzzyFest last year.
We were there.
Last year, and the whole pitch was, there's an app for everything. Don't worry about anything. Everything will be fine. The powerful and the wealthy, they all are dedicated to using technology to make everything better. There's no need to fix anything. Leave it to the professionals.
And I think we said at the time, because our third eye was just being sort of pried open, that as he was talking, we saw the sort of Donnie Darko like tunnel come out of his chest and lead directly onto Epstein's plane.
Yep.
So he's come out with because look. There's this picture that everyone's been circulating of him, Lawrence Krauss, another one of these public intellectuals who, if you go to their Wikipedia page, there's just a subhead that says allegations.
Yeah.
Who and then like a big subplot of the Epstein thing is like how connected he is through funding and personal relationships and networking to like the highest levels of academia, and the way he sort of collected prominent scientists and what he regarded as cutting edge thinkers, Steven Pinker being among them. And there's a picture of him and Lawrence Krauss smiling and sitting at a table with Jeffrey Epstein that was taken in 2014. Now that is a full 7 years after he was originally convicted of solicitation in Florida. And no, he was convicted of, the minor charge of solicitation.
Yeah.
But like the accusations were all there.
Everyone knew that.
Like everybody knew that shit by then. And it was posted on the Facebook. It's all since been scrubbed, but it was posted on the Facebook page of the Jeffrey Epstein Foundation. And this is clearly at a gala dinner of something he sponsored called it's called like the Origin Society at ASU, of which Pinker is also associated with. So like through his funding of all of these various philanthropic endeavors, Pinker is like, I was in the same circles with him, and I ended up in this one photograph with him.
Yeah.
And but I'm saying like the context was you were still attending a dinner sponsored by his money for a program that you're in 2014. To which, like, nobody has ever explained why in 2014 anyone
How is he not a
would
pariah?
be in the same fucking room with this guy.
How is he not a permanent pariah after that? That's the question.
It'd be almost impossible to plead ignorance of the fact of what he was accused of, which is, let's be honest, pimping teenage girls and sexually abusing them.
Yes.
And, so either you are actively complicit in those crimes or just cynically willing to take the money of a serial rapist and have your photo taken with the glad handing with him in exchange for his funding.
Either way, it's a bad look.
Here's what Pinker has finally taken to the internet to address these, allegations, and by allegations I mean photos of him and his name on those flight logs. He has chosen to post this at the blog Why Evolution is True.
Okay, I'm gonna a fact check on this.
So let's begin here. He says, "I'm happy to share my encounters with Epstein." This is Pinker writing here. This is Pinker emailed the proprietor of Why Evolution is True. Again, we're waiting for how many pins on fire that statement has. But he goes, the annoying irony is that I could never stand the guy, never took research funding from him, and always tried to keep my distance. Friends and colleagues described him to me as a quantitative genius and a scientific sophisticate, and they invited me to salons and coffee klatches at which he held court. But I found him to be a kibitzer and a dilettante. He would abruptly change the subject, ADD style, dismiss an observation with an adolescent wisecrack, and privilege his own intuitions over systematic data. I think the dislike was mutual. According to a friend, he, quote, voted me off the island, presumably because he was sick of me trying to keep the conversation on track and correcting him when he shot off his mouth on topics he knew nothing about.
Maybe not the best time to use that metaphor.
I think he means literally, but but here's the thing though. He's trying to say like, I never liked the guy and always tried to keep him at arm's length. But the very first sort of like evidence of that Pinker's giving here seems to imply that that was the opposite, that Epstein was actually trying to keep him at distance.
Yeah.
I was trying to separate.
It's like I was hanging out with him and we were doing great.
I kept coming to his house and coffee clutches, but he never liked me.
He wouldn't let me back in.
And then
also, he was like a jerk know-it-all. Really, that was the big problem with Epstein. He wasn't rigorous enough in his scientific thinking. That was the thing that made him bad. Interesting.
He sounds like a fake friend.
So he goes here, but Epstein had insinuated himself with so many people I intersected with: Alan Dershowitz, Martin Nowak, John Brockman, Steve Koslin, Lawrence Krauss. I'm sure all those guys are glad you're bringing them up as well here. So I was just like,
shut the fuck up. No, don't stop.
So he goes here, and so many institutions he helped fund: Harvard's program in evolutionary dynamics, ASU's Origins Project, and even Harvard Hillel. Again, he started out by saying I never took research funding from him, but all the organizations that I'm a fellow and a member of definitely did take money from him. So he goes, that I often ended up at the same place with him. Most of these gatherings were prior to the revelation of his sex crimes, such as at the 2002 plane trip to the TED Talk with Dawkins, Dennett, Brockmans, and others. But Krauss's Origins Projects meetings came after he served his sentence. So, yeah, again, like the picture everyone's talking about was in 2014.
Yeah.
A full 7 years after he was convicted of solicitation.
Yeah.
Since I was often the most recognizable person in the room. Oh, thanks, Steve. These clout sharks are
stupid haircut.
Yeah. Since I was often the most recognizable person in the room, someone would snap a picture. Some of them resurfaced this past week, circulated by people who disagree with me on various topics and apparently believe that photos are effective arguments. In the interest of full disclosure, there was another connection. Alan Dershowitz and I are friends and colleagues, and we taught a course together at Harvard. He often asked me questions about syntax and the semantics of laws, most recently, the impeachment statute. While he was representing Epstein, he asked me about the natural interpretation of one of the relevant laws, and I offered my opinion. This was cited in a court document. I did it as a favor to a friend and a colleague, not as a paid expert witness, but now I regret that I did so. And needless to say, I find Epstein's behavior reprehensible. So I love that he's using this to exonerate himself. And he's like, oh, no. I gave my legal advice to his defense, but I didn't do it as any type of expert witness or testimony. I just did it as a favor to a friend who's also deeply implicated in his many horrific crimes.
Also, when I say that I'm horrified by Epstein's conduct, I mean being a churl at parties. The only thing I actually care about.
Yeah, he says he has ADD, which, by the way, canceled. And then he goes on to talk about how like in all his books, he's written at length about how much he abhors the violence against and the exploitation of women. And he closes by saying, as far as I know, I'm the only writer who has documented and celebrated actual progress in reducing violence against women and argued that this progress shows that the effort is not futile and should embolden us to press for greater reduction still. The only writer. You're the only writer who's ever done that. Well, I guess you could say you're the only writer who's ever done that and been photographed smiling at the same table next to a serial rapist.
Look, I celebrate myself. I contain contrasts. What's his name?
Whitman.
Uh-oh. Never mind. That's not helping.
And then the guy who runs Why Evolution is True just says here, he closes, of course, by saying, last year I was featured in a New York Times op-ed by Jesse Singal called Social Media is Making Us Dumber. Here's Exhibit A. This year, I appear to be Exhibit B. So he's just saying, like, oh, this is all Twitter and social media's fault. And then the guy who runs Why Evolution is True closes by saying, there you have it. If people are going to tar Pinker by flaunting his association with Epstein, then Pinker deserves a reply. This is his reply and any further discussion to take it into account. Good. I think it should be taken into account.
Yeah, it's all going on into the file.
Wait, the blog is called
Why Evolution is True.
So that's just what the whole blog is about? Just why evolution is true?
I mean, it's like I think it's all just like new atheism shit.
And the occasional defense by a guy who hangs out with a convicted pedophile.